And hello, everybody. Welcome to WD Carousel of Podcast. My name's Crystal.
And I'm Ian.
And today we are going to be going on a little adventure. But as you're noticing, if you are watching the visuals, we are again separated. Ian is no longer
we are
filming with me.
No,
because of the turn of events of the world.
We live in the United States, yes. And it just seemed like the better decision for the time.
It is responsible. We are both negative, but we want to make sure that we are staying safe. So that is, again, if you are watching video of this, why we have decided to make the responsible decision to film separately.
Yes.
Now that I got that out of the way, we are going to have a little bit of a deep dive, nosedive, tech dive.
Nosedive. It's sort of a nosedive of a tech dive. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
We'll try not to make this as confusing, but it can be us. And when we nerd out hard. So
yes, we do. If you've ever listened to this before,
we've done a lot of talking about Disney Imagineers and other influential people within the Walt Disney Company and the jobs that they've done. And we've touched base on, kind of what those positions were, but we've never actually talked about how that goes into the full creation
process
of an animated feature. And that is the backbone of the Disney Company.
Which is crazy because I've talked about like Disney versus Pixar. We've talked about like everything except for like how the animation, like traditional animation works. Like, we just haven't talked about it.
Yeah. And we're like we'll be talking about, so Ub Iwerks did this and Floyd Norman did this and, Rolly Crump did that and blah, 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 blah. And we'll just, start throwing out names and slight descriptions of positions. But, if you aren't in the industry, like I'm not, you went to school.
I did, but I didn't spend a lot of time on the animation floor, but I did spend some time with audio, so I know half of it.
You can help fill in some of the gaps here, but we are going to be going over what the actual traditional animation process is. Now, a lot has changed since Walt first put pencil to paper and they were doing their silly symphonies and all of that, but let's get you just a general idea of what created the Disney Company as we know it.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get started, because I'm trying to force this, but we'll see how it goes.
Yes. You reminded me and I forgot.
No, it is fine because that's what we're here for each other. It's all good.
Correct.
Yes. We have been on Patreon for a little while, but now we are. If you also are a visitor of our website and have before, you will probably notice that it's updated. We've done a couple of things that are behind the scenes that are less important.
You put in a lot of work on that.
I wrote a big post about it on Patreon. It's an exclusive if you want to know what we did. But you get early access to our episodes. You also, if different tiers, I don't have them in front of me because I'm not paying attention properly, but you can also get direct access
pin
to
traders,
Pin Trader and Imagineer or something like that.
Yeah.
And the highest one, you get a monthly meeting video chat with us if you want.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. And it's like 45 minutes. We can just talk about whatever, talk Disney. We can talk about ideas you have for the podcast. Like that's what we're there for. So that these are all options. None of the choices are really much above $10. So it's pretty reasonable.
And then you also get access to us singing the intro to the TQ that just happened.
Yeah, we're trying to put up just the weirdest stuff that you don't see of us because we are actually very funny.
We're not even trying. This is just us prepping for a show, and this came out of nowhere. So yeah, we're silly, and if you want more silly random content, that is a good place to be able to get access to it, as well as help support us with the funding for website storage, materials.
Getting us to be able to do more content. We both have full-time jobs, which I'm not saying that we want to like necessarily do it forever on our own, but it's, giving us that extra stuff gives us more, more resources to make this content. So
yeah, make this better for you.
If this is exciting, if something that you're interested in, please check it out. It's in the description of every single podcast episode now to get to Patreon.
And on our website.
Where you can find it on the website and on the website. So absolutely check it out.
Okay, so back to the animation process. Now, the very first step, once they decide that they're going to create a story, movie, whatever short that they want to have, they have a concept, they have an idea, they have a plot.
Right.
The very first thing that they do is storyboarding. And my favorite thing about this is Disney's the one that created it.
Yeah.
Before the Disney company created storyboarding, what did they even do? Were they like, okay, we're just gonna let the animators go? Honestly,
and I think that they also pioneered storyboarding even in terms of the world of like live, because live production also uses a lot of storyboarding and a lot of different things. I don't think that kind of pre-visualization stuff was used really all that much. It was sort of like, we want these shots, and then it was kind of up to everyone to kind of compose it and figure it out on site. They call it previs now, by the way, in case anyone cares. They didn't do that, and so I believe, I don't know this for sure, but I believe Disney was also the first to make that a thing where you could do pre-visualization for live stuff too.
And that would make sense because then you get things like the sense of plot, verifying the flow of the story. You can, have suggested camera angles or write in notes about lighting and that sort of thing. If you have like this idea in your head. Now, I understand, early in the company when it was just the Silly Symphonies, animation cartoons were not considered a big thing, and they were just kind of a brush off that happened before most movies, most motion pictures that you would see. And so I can see them not really thinking that they have to put a lot of thought and energy into them about what they want to have. But when Walt was like, no, we're going to create a full-length animated feature called Snow White, and this is going to be a long process, and I want to make sure we get every angle correct, that makes sense that they would do this.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's an industry standard thing now, and you can see just from the way that Disney's animated cartoons and feature films and everything look, you can see that level of predetermination and thought about the way things are going to look before it even gets done. You can see that level of detail, It's interesting.
Yeah. Along with that becomes the next step, which is voice recording. But it's things like scratch tracks and rough-in music. So that way they can have an idea of, okay, I'm going to go down here, blah, 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 blah. But it's not the actual actors, or, we're going to put in a song at this time and we think it's going to be this. So we want to have something that fits. Let's just make sure that it works before we send it off to real composers and stuff. And that way they can kind of put it together in the third step, which is an animatic. So that's when you see, if you've ever watched any documentaries, behind the scenes things, and you see storyboard sketches that do a sort of flip book in front of you, and they have very generalized speech on top of it of the storyline. That's where they're doing things like, making sure that everything is correct for timing. If they need to make changes or take out scenes, they can get all of that figured out before it goes into the big processes. Now, not saying that those aren't huge processes to begin with. I mean, when they did Frozen 2, there's like a 4 or 5 part documentary on the making of Frozen 2. And the poor storyboard artist, he had to keep remaking it because they didn't know the end of they didn't know what the ending of the story was going to be. And so they kept remaking him draw things.
Oh no.
Over and over again. So like the beginning animation was actually happening and things were working and like the actors were doing all of their stuff, but they still didn't know what the end was going to be. And so this poor storyboard artist kept having to be like, oh, okay, this is the new thing. And sketch them up real quick and do all of that to get the approval and to go through the animatics before they could even go into everything. It's just ridiculous.
Oh, that, and again, like we were talking about before, animatics also exist in the world of live movies too. So I think that it was one of those things where that was sort of an early thing that they did as well. It all kind of ties together.
Once that's all approved, then they get into the design. And that's the part where most people start thinking about a movie's actually beginning. So building up characters with the model sheets or the 3D sculptures that they might have, so you can see what a character looks like and when they're happy, sad, frustrated, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Color stylists can figure out the color theming and moods for scenes, or even moods for characters, if they're going to have this standardized, sort of feeling. Art directors are able to come in there with, art styling, as we've talked about, like for 101 Dalmatians, they did a completely different artistic style for that movie than they did for like Sleeping Beauty. And you can figure out what area you're going towards and build up the actual visuals around that.
Didn't we also do an episode talking about color rules?
We talked about villains.
Villains, that's right. We talked about their colors.
Ooh, that's an early one. Ooh, pulling that out of the archive there.
Yeah, that's gonna be an archive episode. See that coming out, or you can just go watch it or listen if you want.
It's probably like 5 or 6, honestly.
It's really early. Yeah.
And then comes
some really good early episodes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. When we were, okay. So a little tangent here. I'm not sure if Ian in his intros said anything about why we were going back to the archives, but I just had a full hip replacement surgery.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to keep providing content to you guys, and we wanted to show you guys episodes that were beloved, but new audience might not be familiar with them. So we've been pulling things out of the archives, and we've been discovering all of this content that we've built that is amazing that we forgot
really
about.
Liked.
Yeah.
not to toot our own horns too much, but we actually liked some of our really older episodes.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, like the Haunted Mansion, I think, what was that, episode 2 or 3?
Haunted Mansion was episode 3, I think. Yeah.
And I'm like, we just literally did the Haunted Mansion movie, so it makes sense to bring that back up. But the next area that we're going to get into is we've joked about how this is what made iWorks actually leave the Disney company. And it's timing. And this is something that, when they weren't doing storyboarding, then an animator was able to put in, especially if they weren't having any vocalization, music. I mean, a lot of that before was silent movies. I mean, they didn't have to time it up to anything, but now that you're putting in audio cues and all of this other stuff, you have to have a scheduled timing to squish an animation into.
Yeah.
And in the episode, we talked about how much he hated that.
Yeah. Oh, he hated that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's the reason why he left the Disney company. Because he didn't want to the first time. Because he didn't want to have to stick with scheduled, okay, you have to have this within, 15 seconds.
Right. He wanted to have his own set of rules. And instead, he's just like, no, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and...
That's not the flow that I was feeling. And I don't like being constrained like that and restricted.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm putting that.
He was a real drama queen.
I don't know why I'm putting
that's becoming like our iWorks voice. It's like, yes, of course.
I mean, he's a genius, don't get me wrong. I mean, that episode, it just, there wasn't even enough time to go into everything that he created. But
he had so much going on.
Anyways, we're digressing too much. So sure. The next level is where we actually start to get into the art level. I'm air quotating. You can't hear this on a podcast, but
you're doing it anyway.
Yeah. So this is where we get into layouts. So we're working about backgrounds. Background artists work on camera angles, paths that the characters are going to be taking, shading, lighting, actually creating, what they're going to be constructing.
This part is like a black box for me because like I can't art, you know what I mean? Like I can't do that part, like the animation or even just like a single painting. Like that is not something my brain can wrap itself around. Like, I can't do that. Like, I need a camera so the camera can make the image for me. Like, it's just so weird. Like, it's such a different world.
Yeah. And character artists at that time are also working on movements, poses, characters, signature styles. So like the smolder of, Eugene.
Jeez.
Yes, I pulled out Eugene and not Flynn Rider because that's
okay.
his name. But anyways, and then we move into animation, which is what this is titled about because that's what most people know. They're used to being able to see one picture connect to another picture after all of those steps have been created. But again, there's many levels into this that we've discussed as well.
Right.
So the animators... Go for it.
Just before animation, we should mention that all the audio has probably been finalized by this point.
Yes. So actors,
or most of it,
music, all of
actors
that.
And music.
So they know what to animate to.
Right. Details.
I mean, a lot of the animators take inspiration from the voice actors with their gestures, their facial, structure, and the way that they make noises.
Yeah, I believe Disney was a pioneer in recording the performances of the voice actors.
Yeah.
Was that something that they started? I think it might have been. Yeah.
That, and they had,
might have even been an
they were also one of the first people to have live actors doing movements for animation too. Yeah, for modeling.
Yeah.
So they would bring in like live animals, or they'd have like live stage or video actors put on just really generalized costumes and dance around boxes saying this is a stump, or go up a ramp and this is a hill. And then there's supposed to be an owl up there and you sing to the owl so we can get angles and stuff. But that's when the animators come in and they take generalized, like, okay, so they're going to go from this pose to this pose, to this pose, to this pose. And that's what most people stop at, as animators are the ones that create the movie. They're the ones that create the movement. They're the ones that create the character. And that is true. Let's not discount that at all. But then there's so many other layers in between.
Yes.
Called in-betweeners.
Yeah, it's funny. In-betweeners. Yeah. Oh, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy because... the very first thing that's crazy is like you think of the animator and be like, wow, these animators do so much work, and it's like, it's true, but they also are literally just like doing reference key animation points for a character. They're not drawing the whole image, they're just drawing the character.
They're drawing an image, but they're not drawing the follow through. So when you are taking like a step, they have one step, and then they might do a half step, and then they might do the other step, but they're not actually giving the flow.
Right. So they're not animating every frame, and they're also not animating. They're not drawing the whole picture. Like, they're drawing like the character, but like people would imagine like they're like they're not like the background, and we'll get to it. The background is also not part of it. They're literally just drawing. The animator is drawing like the character. Yeah. Which I sometimes feel like people don't necessarily know. But probably our audience probably does.
Well, and the other thing that most people don't realize is they animate to 24 cells or frames per second.
Yes, indeed.
So that means there has to be 24 individual images. Sometimes they might reuse one or two, just if like a character's holding a pose. It's not that big of a deal to like let it pause for a second. But for the most part, it's the in-betweener's job to make the other, if you get 3 frame references from the animator for a second long step. So let's say Mickey's whistling and taking a step. Okay. There are going to be 24 frames in that second of that step, and the animator's done 3 of them. The in-betweener has to make all the connecting frames of the other 21 cells for that character.
It's so crazy to me. The in-betweeners are like truly the unsung heroes because, you think of the animators, these like creators, but like no one is more prolific than the in-betweeners. Like they create more work than anybody else. It's just crazy. Like they're not I'm not starting the thing.
We're going to hold off on that phrase for just a little bit, but they are definitely unsung heroes, especially being able to have to duplicate so many animators' styles of characters too. So they can't change the features or the style, like the signature style of one animator or the other animator, because that's not the style that they do. They have to make sure that it all blends.
Right.
I would hazard to say that Ink and Paint girls are definitely unsung, and they've done everything. But
that's fair.
In-betweeners are definitely like right there with them, though. They've had to do a lot of work, and they don't get any credit. They're like low man on the animation totem pole.
Yeah, they're at the bottom.
It's like, oh, okay, you're getting into animation. We're going to put you here, and you can do your work and show us that you're good at this. And then we might, upgrade you to backgrounds. And that's when those are actually in traditional animation put on like big reels. Think scroll work.
Yep.
Because then they can go ahead and make a whole scene, and as they're filming or printing the cells and actually combining them later, they can just like rotate it slightly for the 24 different frames that need to happen per cell or whatever to be able to get a full scene. So they're doing those separately.
Yeah, without having to generate that like every single time they have to create a new frame, which is crazy.
But that's where you get the disparity of having like the background look one way, and then there's this one bush that looks slightly different. And there's treasure behind. I mean, sorry, that was wrong tech, but you get what I'm saying. There's one bush that is going to be interacted with.
It sounds like Cuphead to me.
And then the final-ish stages, but there's still a lot that goes on here.
There's still more.
It's the ink, print, or paint, depending on what time period you're talking about, and camera work. So the inkers are the ones that originally would clean up all the lines that the animating artists had put on the cell, and they would just basically do the black work, the black line work. Thick lines, little lines, just to make sure you have those definitions. Paint department, the Disney company was the first animation company to go into color, and they created most of the colors that you saw on screen. Like even I've talked about this before, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the ink and painters were primarily women. And when they were trying to come up with the blush color for Snow White's cheeks, the girls were actually using their own blush from their purse, because they didn't have the color created yet.
They couldn't get that color built, so they're just like, whatever, we have it. That's crazy.
And so they would have to touch every single cell. So 24 frames or cells per second, and say that it is a animated motion picture. We're talking a minimum of 60 minutes. It's a lot of work for these girls to go in and color and make sure everything is matching perfectly. And then it gets into the actual camera work, where before they had do you know what they're called? The holes that they put at the bottom of the cells to make sure that they line up exactly correctly every single time. You know which ones I'm talking about, right?
It's not like the film sprockets. It's like the alignment holes at the bottom of like the transparent cell. I don't know what those are called. But either way, so they would have to line that up with having the scroll work of the background behind it, and then they take a picture for the frame of the film, and then they remove that clear cell to put the next cell on there, maybe turn the background just slightly, and go through this whole process. And it would take forever to be able to build the movie this way. It's an obscene amount of work, the multiplane camera systems, and they were big.
And then getting into multiplanes, because I wasn't even talking about that, because then you're talking about multiple different cells building on top of the background to give you these depth looking scenes. I lost it.
I understand. I understand.
And then from there, they moved into the technology that started in 101 Dalmatians that we discussed as well.
Yeah, the Xerox process. And that mostly revolved around the fact that they didn't have to do as much inking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they just basically could just take the original animators' drawings and they could just make it into a cell that could then be colored in. And there wasn't that level of somebody going through and removing the messy lines and cleaning it up with the inkers didn't do that anymore. So they just basically had all of the edges that the animators had built would be like expressed in the final product, which creates a very distinctive look.
Yes. In the old fashioned way, they would animate on paper, and then it was the ink girls that would put the cell on top and then outline over top of it, kind of like you're tracing.
Yep.
And then with the Xerox process, they could just put the image, instead of having someone separate, put the film on or put the cell on top, the clear cell, and then draw it out. They would just stick it into a copy machine, and then out it would come on a clear form. So that kind of got rid of some of the inkers. Not all of them. There are still plenty of inkers in the industry, but nowhere near what it was decades ago.
Absolutely.
And then now they've gotten rid of the camera format that we were just discussing. And what they do instead is they now scan those cells that they create into a computer to put them together in a form that they've been joking around calling tradigital. Instead of traditional, it's digital.
God.
Because then they don't have to worry about, matching them up completely and click. Okay, everybody, let's do this. And then click. Okay, everybody. And then let's do this and click. But this is still the traditional style of animation. We're not talking about what we did in the Disney versus Pixar episode where we were talking about Disney digital animation versus Pixar digital animation. This is still hand-drawn 2D animation.
Right. And that actually does have a tie into that episode that I have not listened to since we did it. They had that was actually one of the systems that Pixar, the computer company, before they got into doing all of the stuff they do now, that was one of the things that they built was the system that could scan and hold high bit data of the cells. They built that system that could digitally manipulate and interact with the different frames. In fact, there's even an entire file format that still exists today that I can save as called .pixar, and it's a super high bit rate. Seriously, a high file format that you can use to store high bit rate images that they were using at the time at Disney to store their cell frames digitally.
And then after that, sorry, I'm just going to get into it because we talked about it. That's when they do the sound effects and the Foley work.
Yes.
And if you don't know what Foley is,
it's a lot of fun. You should just Google it and watch people do it because it is hilarious.
It's literally making the step noises or you hear a brush of something that it's the background noise that you expect to hear, but you would notice if it was not there. But you don't pay attention to it if it is.
Attention to it. Right. Good Foley work you never notice because it just works. And that was, I spent a little bit of time in school. I spent a little bit of time in audio, and we did some stuff in the Foley studio. And it is a fascinating thing to do. And so you go into it looks like it was a standard recording studio with the control room and the main studio space. But then these big these big carpeted sections of floor looked like they had handles you could lift up. And you could just pick these up, and they call them Foley pits. And you just pick it up, and there's different types of surfaces. Seriously, there's asphalt, concrete, gravel,
sand,
fake grass, sand. Yeah, it's all down there, and you can use your feet or use other shoes or whatever, and just props, whatever. And so you can do that just for anything. You have these surfaces available to you for walking and whatever.
And it's the weirdest props too to create other noises that we don't even realize that they're using for them. It's just it's amazing work. And if you're curious about that is a rabbit hole to get into, but it's so fascinating.
It's so worth it. Yeah, it's super cool. But and then once that's all together, then it has to get baked into a print for distribution. And then at that point, and traditionally that's how it would go out. Now, of course, if you use like as you were saying, the tradigital system, you could do a digital master as well.
Mm-hmm. And there's
if you want me to do a diatribe on that, I can do it on Patreon, but I'm not going to do that here.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about traditional animation process. So this is what started the Disney company. This is what they were known for. This is how they contributed and how they helped the industry grow. And a lot has changed since then, but this is the heart and soul of Mickey Mouse and the movies that we grew up with. And I just wanted to give a little bit of a deep dive because the people that we've been referencing, we're going to be talking a lot more about the 9 Old Men, and they are like, we haven't even started on the 9 Old Men, but I know we're going to be doing Ollie and who's his?
I can't remember. This is bad.
Oh my gosh. I can't remember. I feel horrible.
I don't even have my phone.
We're
like,
going to brain fart this, and then we will yell at each other at like midnight.
This is usually how it goes.
But we're going to start talking about the 9 Old Men here. So it gives you a little bit of context when we're discussing their contributions to the company about what they had done within their different departments. So
absolutely,
I think this was a good addition to help prep before we get to the next one. So
Good job, past Crystal and Ian. I don't know when we planned this, but it was good work on our part.
I don't know, but it was over a beer or several.
It was over a beer. It was a long time ago.
It was a very long time ago. Yeah,
we've scheduled this out.
This has been WD Carousel of Podcast. My name's Crystal,
and I'm Ian,
and we hope you have a great, big, beautiful tomorrow. Bye, everybody.